All right, traders, welcome to today's recap. This is Christian from Tribeca Trade Group, and it is Thursday, October 10th. So almost done with the week. I was just reading some headlines now about Trump. He says that the trade talks went very well, and he says China trade talks will continue tomorrow. So that just came out on Bloomberg. So there you have that. Again, trade talks going very well. I'm surprised we didn't hear China wants a trade deal, but so we'll have to see how things go. Obviously, the market is, kind of wait and see to see how this trade talks meeting ends and kind of what happens after that. Last night we saw, obviously a whole bunch of gyrations in S&P futures and in the FX market as well. Based on that. So, I think that's going to continue to be what goes on for tomorrow. Of course, our risk disclaimer for the video, everything that we're going over is for information purposes only, not giving out any advice or recommendations. So, yeah, it kind of seems a little bit like, buy the rumor a little bit going on. We don't know if it's going to be sell the news. Don't know. I could tell you I still have some S&P puts on, just in case it is something like that where they leave and nothing happens. So, again, nobody knows what's going to happen with this meeting. But as I said in the pre-market session and as I've been saying, what you can control is your risk and what you're exposed to. Again, we can't control these headlines that we're going to get. We can watch our levels. We could watch our risk, so on and so forth. So, today's performance, I'll just do a quick recap of that, and then we'll talk about, what I thought was some really great signals for the day. But yeah, you could see pretty much everything rallying from the open. When we came in, equity futures were basically unched flat on the day, and we rallied throughout the session, and mainly till about 12 o'clock ish, till about lunchtime, somewhere in there. Again, IWM really not participating too much in the rally, most of it coming from SPY, Qs. And then you could see, which kind of gave us a little bit of a hint this morning, right around, I think, 8 o'clock, 8:30, bonds and gold and silver started to sell off. Well, they continue to sell off throughout the session. We'll talk about TLT in just a minute, but for the day, down 1.5%. So what rallied, based on that? The banks had a good day today. I'm surprised the utilities hung in there. I actually put on a little bit of a contrarian short play in XLU just to give that a shot. I very rarely trade counter trend, but every once in a while I'll try it. I think the utilities and some of those minimum volatility areas of the market are pretty overcrowded at this point. Everybody's been hiding out, so it may continue to work. But I think they're probably due for a little bit of a pullback, and seeing what rates did today, maybe people will start to unwind some of that, trade where people have been hiding in. What performed pretty well? So you could see steel on the top of the list. So either there's a bit of short covering, going into this meeting. Or a little bit of positioning, probably a little bit of both, right? These are some beaten up areas. The steel names, up 2.8% on the day. That's the steel ETF. Transports, I was just looking at the chart. I think that the airlines have been doing pretty well. UAL was the one that I was looking at the other day. But, interesting, right where they kind of needed to hold support, they are bouncing there. So no breakdown right now in the transports ETF, and again, one of the best performing groups throughout the day. Solar names back in the green again today. SEDG, which is performing pretty well. Remember, I was on Bloomberg last week on this one. This is, giving myself a little pat on the back here, but was sub 80, and look at this thing, up to 88. The other one that I've been talking about, which I've been have had a nice trade on, is this Taiwan Semiconductor full-on breakout. I saw a lot of people getting frustrated about a week ago. Nobody looking at Taiwan Semiconductor. Everybody on Twitter talking about breakdowns and everything. No breakdown in Taiwan Semiconductor. So still very nice. They have earnings next week. I actually took off my trade today in Taiwan Semiconductor. I took that off for profits. You could see here, again, these are all my trades for the day, completely transparent. Also traded a little bit more Roku today. Very, very small trade. You could see light risk, but I wanted to participate a little bit. Gilead was a nice trade, just recapping some of my trades. But you can see here's Taiwan Semiconductor out for more than a double on that one. And then I took the final piece off for a little bit less than a double. Again, not being too greedy, as I was talking about pre-market session, I'm not looking for home runs right now in option trades. If I can get something like that for a double or close to a double on the last portion of the trade, for a trade that I've had on in a couple weeks, so be it. Let's not be too greedy. What else performed pretty well today? Chinese internets were up a little bit today. I mentioned the banks. So again, a lot more green today. And who knows? Don't know if it's just all, if it's a lot of that short covering or if it's people actually positioning. If we turn over to option activity, a lot of speculative stuff as usual for option activity. I'll go over a couple trades, but, a lot of stuff where, again, I think people buying things, I always have my opinion on, option activity in some things, pure just momentum, right? Some people buying Caterpillar when it's already up over 2% on the day, you know, that kind of thing, right? People, I don't know why somebody trades that kind of stuff, but yeah, like Caterpillar calls going up, like after the move has already taken place. We went over, by the way, and I'm not saying I called it because we just talked about names that are really trade sensitive. I talked about a strangle play that you could play in Caterpillar, which I think would have worked pretty well. But sorry, but the last thing that I want to do is trade chase Caterpillar when it's already up over 2%, just because there's a momentum call buyer on the tape. But again, that's kind of what we see with option flow half the time. So let me go over a couple other things that I thought were really interesting, and then I'll break down a couple other trades. But S&P, you could see we're kind of right back to this level. I talked about this, how looking at the market webs indicator, the value areas, just really giving a good roadmap for the day that's filled with headlines, right? If you're continuing to kind of look at support and resistance areas, where there's pivot areas, you're doing very well. I talked about this. I find this very funny, I to be honest, I don't really get it. I call this stuff out, ahead of time. I said, this morning, I said watch 2947. That's just basically as far as we went, and we're trying to get over that level. I think if we do get some type of trade deal, we'll get above resistance. But until that happens, we're not breaking upon that level. And then we've got resistance up here as well. That also carries over to the daily chart. But I'm giving really good levels. I just don't know. So we sell this indicator, right? And you never hear me talk. I don't want to say never, but for the most part, I don't talk about like selling products in my videos. But it really gives great signals. I'll talk about TLT in a second. But hey, if you know in the beginning of the day where you want to basically try a trade and then get out of it, it just comes up over and over. That these levels look pretty good, but I'm looking like, I'm thinking like, hey, people are really going to say this that was pretty good, nailing this, and I get like 2 likes on it. So I don't know if people think like I'm making stuff up, but here's where it was. I said 2947. Watch this level, cannot get above it. And we faded a bit from there. So again, especially in this one, we've got headlines all over the place. Looking at a place where you can basically take some money off the table. And again, you don't have to take the whole trade off, but you're slammed right into resistance. Same thing with this TLT. Interesting on the downside, right? So I had talked about this too. I hate kind of calling things out, but I had said TLT VPOC imminent on the upside, right? So why does this happen, right? And this was all the way when it was down here, just so you know, I'm not making this up. But I had talked about this TLT back on the 2nd, once it broke out of this range, and I said this thing's going for this. So again, why does that happen? Why did we go up to those levels and then stop and reverse? They really just act as magnets. It's an area of high volume where a lot of buyers and sellers have previously met, but literally that's as far as we went. So now where are we now? What's the setup now? Well, either we're going to bounce pretty decently from here, or if not, if we break it, we're going to go down to 140. So why do I say that with confidence? And again, nothing is 100% certain, but that's where a lot of buyers and sellers have previously met. You could see the volume spike here. And again, once you get out of range, there's a pretty damn good chance that you're going to go back to a level where it was a high volume area, especially that hasn't been revisited before, and that level hasn't been revisited. So I would keep an eye on that. Again, TLT has a lot of implications, right? When interest rates move, when interest rates are really low, and remember TLT is inverted basically does the opposite of what rates do, right? So when TLT goes up, interest rates go down. Things like home builders have done very well as interest rates have gone down. Banks have done poorly. Utilities have done well. Right? So if this continues to break here a little bit further to the downside and interest rates go up, maybe banks get a little bit more of a bid, and maybe utilities start to get unwound a little bit. And again, the correlation isn't perfect one for one. I've been going over this in the trading room. It doesn't mean so. Again, been explaining this a lot, but just because TLT goes down 1%, it doesn't mean the banks go up 1%. Right? There's a relationship there, but the correlation isn't one for -1. It's about -0.5. And again, that's a relationship over time, not a day-to-day relationship. So just bear that in mind. But again, important to watch what TLT does. So yeah, it'll be so if there is some type of mini trade deal, where could we get to before we hit the next resistance zone? So again, remember this 2963 level. 2963 is going to come up same. I think it's also significant when a level comes up on multiple time frames. So 2965 is going to be a barrier there, but of course we could get through it. If you have a big event, but that's the next level of resistance, and if we get through there, then we've we've got some interesting things going on. All right, so that's what we could possibly look for, and again, if not, right, this move has basically been realized for the week. We're back to where we started the week. Isn't that funny? Round trip. All right, what else? A little bit of option activity today. We saw some Gilead short-term like chatter calls that worked. Like I said, I did play that trade. That worked. Ali Financial, I think, is at a good spot. I talked about this trade earlier today. I did put a starter on today. Why did I put just a starter on? Because I'm not adding a ton of risk here. And I have to make sure, if I'm going to add a new position on, especially if it's options, I have to unwind something. I'm not adding new risk. Excuse me, 1 second. All right, so that was an interesting trade. But just bear in mind, I talked about this earlier in the day. While I've had some really good trades, Lulu was another one that we sent out a couple weeks ago. You had to be a little bit patient with this one. But I think I sent this trade idea out about 2 weeks ago. And look at this thing blast off. It had been trying the last couple days, but took off today. So really nice winner for me. And I had to do a little bit of trade management with this one. But out of this one for $6, paid $2.60. Like I said, this was originally a call spread, but Lulu started to fall a couple days after I put that on, and I was able to do to again, it was a call spread. So what I did was I covered. This was a debit call spread, right? So I was long the closer to the money strike and short the further out strike. So as Lulu kind of came in and wasn't doing anything, chopping around wasn't doing anything, what I did was I bought back the short strike further out, and then I was just basically long the calls. And I got a little bit lucky there because that this trade ended up working much better than a call spread would have. And I made money on both sides, right? I was able to to buy back the short put spread for pretty cheap money. And I think I did that up here. Where's my trade management? There it is. I bought back the short for 38 cents. I originally sold that for like $1.20. Again, um, you know, if you're doing spreads like I do, call spreads, put spreads, debit and credit spreads, there's some management that you could kind of take advantage of when you're doing that. What else? And then I took advantage. Abbott was another winner, not as big as a winner as the other ones, but I took advantage of just having a really nice having a nice day P&L wise to kind of get out of some trades that aren't working. I'm still in this one. It's good to talk about the losers too. I kind of screwed up with this one. We talked about how this one, the technicals here kind of told you this was leaning to the downside. It had trouble rallying, holding any rallies, but again, making sure I go over this a lot because I think so many people on Twitter are following option activity. I don't really get why, but a lot of times these trades end up being complete losers. And they've been buying SE calls for weeks now, and the trade has gone horribly. So, again, good to talk about the losers. What I did poorly here was you got to just forget. I think what the issue is, and happens to me sometimes, is everybody thinks when they see option activity, aggressive call activity, that they think that they know something. Those are really few and far between. So this one, it doesn't look like they know anything. They're just, we're positioning in a name, and it hasn't worked. So again, tough to talk about the losers and the winners. I don't have all the time all winners. I would love it if I did. Just a couple other trades that we saw on the tape today. I'll just kind of fill in, a little bit of other positioning that we saw. Again, I think there's valuable things to get from option activity. I think people on Twitter are really dependent on it. So anyway, I'll move on. What else do we see today? Pretty big 1x2 call spread in win. There were some Xilinx calls. Again, one of those things where Xilinx was already up big before the calls hit. And again, this is in my opinion, like, maybe if you're holding it overnight, but let's see, what time did the Xilinx calls go up? This was fairly early in the day, maybe in the first 5 or 10 minutes. So 9:39. So basically, this is 9:35. So the calls went up right here. So you would have had to say, do I want to chase this for another, this much higher? Because, again, you're dealing with calls. If you're buying stock, it's a different story. But here's where the calls went up in Xilinx. To me, I didn't want to chase that. So again, being really picky and choosy. A couple other trades that I thought were interesting. Dollar Tree, January 120 calls. I mentioned Alley already. I think there was about 13,000 calls traded. There was a little bit of the stamp.com. Eaton saw some calls, a little bit of repeat of call activity. Amarin saw this 10,000 block go up, November 17 calls. A little bit more of speculation using KWeb. That's, in my opinion, just straight trade. Somebody's looking for a trade deal and looking for the biggest bang for their buck. Might work if that happens. All right, guys. So the video is about 20 minutes long. So again, with a very headline-driven market, the market webs, continuing to give me some really good signals on where to not force trades. That's the main thing, right? Because, we're seeing all this momentum call buying, and it really kind of helps me to say, do I want to be adding risk here? No. I want to be taking profits for the most part. Not on everything, but again, just managing your risk when we hit resistance. All right, guys, have a great night. We'll see if we get any more headlines. It sounds like they're going to continue with the meeting tomorrow, and I think Trump meets with one of the deputies over there. So we'll see how it goes. Have a great night, everybody, and we'll see you tomorrow.